Good evening, everyone. We're going to just wait a couple of minutes for people to trickle into the meeting, and then we'll start. So I see a lot of people are joining us already, but we're just going to be waiting a couple of minutes just to make sure that everyone comes in during the beginning of the meeting. Thanks everyone for joining us tonight. Yep, just going to wait a couple more minutes as people trickle into the meeting. So thanks everyone. Okay, welcome everyone. My name is Dan Cushing. I work for the Department of Conservation and Recreation, and we're excited to have you participate in the intersection improvement project at Lynn Fells Parkway and Melrose Street in Melrose. This is our second virtual public meeting on this project, the first one happening on December 9th, and we're really excited to have you here. We're anticipating the meeting going for an hour and a half to answer your questions and receive your comments on the presentation that we're presenting. Next slide. So for meeting logistics, there are going to be two ways to ask questions during the meeting. One is to raise your hand using the Zoom functionality. You should see a raise hand button on your Zoom browser. And then the second is a Q&A feature that Zoom has, which allows you to provide us with written questions during the meeting. You're also going to have 2 weeks opportunity to provide us with public comments on DCR's public comment page, mass.gov/forms/DCR-public-comments. And also, just so everyone is aware that this meeting is going to be recorded and the recording will be public record. Also, just a heads up, so in case anyone's curious, I have a second monitor up here with all of my information. So up here, if I'm looking up here, I'm looking at comments, questions, attendees. Over here's the presentation for me, just so that everyone knows, seeing myself doing that in the cam. So can we go to the next slide? So I just want to take this moment to thank the Baker-Polito administration for their leadership in this, as well as Secretary Thea Herides and Commissioner Montgomery. At this point, I'm going to pass it over to Jeff Parenti to start talking about the project.
Good evening, everyone, and thanks for coming. This is meeting number 2 of our intersection improvement project. Our first meeting was in December. So tonight I'll just run through the agenda a little bit here. I'll give a little bit of the project background, talk through the schedule of the design process, and then just a brief review of the existing conditions that we talked about at our last meeting. I'll have our design consultant, Niche Engineering, run through our design concepts to show to you tonight. And then we'll turn it over to you for your questions and your comments on what you've seen. And then we'll finish the meeting by talking about what comes next. Next slide, Faisal. All right, and as I always like to start with all of our meetings, our mission statement here on the screen. I won't read it this time because we went through this a little bit last time, but I wanted to put this back on the screen just to remind all of you. Some of you may be new to the process, and this might be your first meeting, but the message here is that the DCR Parkways vehicle mobility is not part of our mission. Our mission is to make the parkways and the intersections within those friendly for drivers and bicyclists and pedestrians alike. And our parkways are supposed to be a place of recreation as well. One example of this is just this past weekend, the city of Melrose, the mayor and his staff sponsored the Free Streets Melrose, which took place on Lynn Fells Parkway in this neighborhood. I hope you had a chance to go. It was a really terrific event. But that's the sort of thing that we have in mind with our vision for the parkways and how we like the parkways to be used. It is a part of the roadway network, but they are special. And we think of them differently than we do other roads. Next slide, please, Faisal. And I'd also like to just review the project team, the people who are working the project. You did have a chance to meet most of us last time. Again, my name is Jeff Parenti. I'm the Deputy Chief Engineer, responsible for the parkway system across the Commonwealth. I should also disclose that I'm also a Melrose resident. I also have a student at the middle school. So I know this intersection really well. I drive it a lot, going to Whole Foods and other places. I bike it every day. Well, when the weather gets warmer, I'll be biking it every day to get some exercise after sitting in this chair all day long. And I've certainly walked it many times. So I experience the intersection like you from all different uses, whether it be driving, walking, or bicycling. Val Soroka is our project manager. He's also the section head for our traffic section. Dan Cushing, you heard from earlier. Craig Cashman is attending today as our Director of Government Affairs. And then our design team, as I mentioned, from Niche Engineering, Faisal Hussaini is the principal in charge. We'll be hearing from him in a moment. Virendra Gurung is serving as our project manager from Niche, and Adina Alpert is our traffic engineering expert, and she'll be available to answer all of your traffic engineering questions when we get to the Q&A portion. If we go to the next slide, Faisal, thank you. So the project schedule I mentioned, our first meeting was in December. At that meeting, we called that a listening session. The idea was to present a little bit of what we know of the intersection today, go over the existing layout, show you where all the driveways are, show you the geometry and the strange angle of the intersection that we're dealing with, talk about some of the design constraints, give you some traffic counts, some crash information, and to hear from you as to what you'd like to see us do with this intersection. We had a few dozen comments, both at the meeting and then the public comment period afterwards. And then we took that back in the time in between and then put together a set of concept plans that you're going to see a little bit later on tonight. And in part of that, we did some collaboration with the city staff to really hone down the concepts. And we have 4 of them to show you, and that's tonight's meeting. My goal tonight, I'd like to hear from as many people as we can. And I'm hoping, ideally, that you would all love the same exact one. That almost never happens. But if we can leave this meeting and after the public comment period ends, if we can leave that process with what we call a preferred alternative, one of the 4 that we like the best, we can then move on and complete the design process. And our plan right now on this schedule is to complete that in the fall of this calendar year. Next slide. And just to go over a little bit of what we talked about last time, and I won't go into detail because we did this in December, but here's an aerial photograph of our intersection. That's a little bit to the left of this photograph. And the reason why we wanted to put this in concept is because we have 2 other existing intersections on Main Street and Green Street, which already have traffic signals. They're very close by. Both of them are owned by the city of Melrose. And I want to point out, and this is very important, that coordination with the city staff is critical to the success of our project. I think what I will probably hear from some of you tonight is that you're nervous about installing potentially a 3rd traffic signal on this short section of Parkway, and I share that concern. But we are committed to working with the city to make sure that all 3 of these intersections, should we choose to build a signal here at Melrose Street, we'll work very closely with the engineering staff at Melrose to make sure that these 3 intersections work together seamlessly, so that if you are stopped at one, you won't have to stop at either one of the other 2. That is some traffic engineering nuance that, if you like, we can go into detail later and explain how that works. But the point being is that we want the experience to be somewhat seamless here and transparent if we are to control the intersection of Melrose Street, that we have the context in mind. The goal of the project, as you all know, the high school, middle school campus is just to the left of the photo. We have a large number of students who are walking and riding to school every morning and then leaving in the afternoon. It may interest you to know that this is the only intersection in the entire parkway system that is assigned 2 crossing guards. So that tells you what level of comfort that we have or don't have really with the existing crossings here. So pedestrian bicycle safety is very important to the goals of this project. We want to get students back and forth to the school safely. We also want to move people along the parkway safely as well. So what you're going to see tonight is some improvements to not just the vehicle movements here, but also pedestrian and bicycle facilities also. So before I hand it over to Faisal to show you the 4 concepts, I do recognize that it's a little bit difficult to see plans on a screen, and some of you I know are probably looking at them on a tablet or even on a phone. We understand that. If we were in person, if we were at the high school right now in a room together, we'd have all 4 of these concepts on an easel that you could go up and walk up and inspect them and take a look at them side by side. Unfortunately, we don't have that option available tonight. So we'll do the best we can to show you each alternative and explain the differences between them. But I would encourage you, if you have a pencil handy, just to jot down some notes. And then once we get to the Q&A session, we can answer your specific questions. And it certainly helps the design team if you have a preference to say, I like 1, I like number 2, I don't like number 3. That really helps us narrow down and hopefully to get to a single preferred alternative that we can then go and design. So what I'll do right now is hand it over to Faisal Hussaini from Niche Engineering, and I'll take you through all 4 concepts for you.
Thank you, Jeff, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. Again, the 4 concepts that we came up with are the results of our previous meeting, as it was mentioned on December 9, where we took all the good suggestions we got from that meeting, and then we had some traffic data where we combine all the information and do some evaluation and an assessment. One of the assessment is we look at the if that traffic signal is warranted. And per federal guidelines, there are 8 warrants, and we take a look at the applicable ones. And based on the analysis that we have done, a signal is warranted based on the volume of traffic. For this concept, concept 1, as you can see, we have kind of rearranged some of the lanes. Basically, the current dimensions of the lanes between Main Street and Melrose are on the kind of lower side. They're less than 10 feet, some of them. So we did some sliver widening to provide adequate lane width, at least 10.5 feet for the lanes. And then we, as you can see, the left turn movements will extend throughout that segments. And I just want to mention the spacing between the intersections that we have between Melrose Street and Main Street, 300 feet. And then also between Main and Green is 300 feet. And in terms of the lane configuration, you can see we have some bicycle accommodation within the project limits, with the hope eventually that those accommodation can be extended beyond the intersection as time goes on. And so for some areas like this between Main and Melrose, we have what we call a sharrow, bicycle lane where bicycles tend to share the road with the vehicles. Coming on Melrose southbound, we have 2, exclusive kind of bicycle lanes. And it's kind of similar when you see like sometimes a shoulder on a roadway, it's used by bicyclists. And on the westbound and the eastbound on the Parkway, it's a sharrow throughout that segment. And on Melrose southbound, we have it for a distance, exclusive lanes, and then they merge back with the general traffic as they approach Main Street. So there are some aspect of the design that we kind of had to focus on, and traffic engineering basically to improve the operation at any intersection is really we focus on the point of conflicts. And then the more conflicts we can eliminate, the better the operation and the safer it will become. So if you look at the Crystal Street, you know, how close it is to the intersection with the parkway, it's really kind of, it can cause a lot of problems because the distance is not even sufficient to kind of contain one vehicle away from the other traffic. So any vehicle that turn left and trying to stop at the stop bar, it can extend to the opposite direction of the traffic on Melrose Street, and that can become a problem. As you can see, all the way around the intersection, we stayed within the street layout line. We did not encroach on a private property at this time. So and then we have added some reconfiguration where we can reconfigure some of the green space. We try to accommodate as much as possible in terms of green space. From a safety perspective for the operation of traffic, you know, especially for pedestrian crossing in this area, given the school, the middle school is, or the high school is right at the northwest corner. We are going to accommodate pedestrian crossing through the signal phasing, where we're going to have an exclusive phase for pedestrian. So when a pedestrian push the button and they get the walk signal, all the traffic will be stopped at the intersection. So the next phase concept, as you can see, we said, what if, you know, we can take out that, you know, that short segment of the connecting Crystal to the Parkway, and then we can create, you know, a pretty large area of green space, and also so the kind of the cons will be that Crystal Street has to go right and then go down on Melrose Street and then to Main Street, instead of really accessing the Parkway from this area. All the driveways, as you can see, the kind of for this concept, we left them as they are, and so that kind of the main thing is like this become a T intersection. So for concept number 3, as again, is that we have reconfigured basically the bicycle lane to make it on-street bicycle lane instead of the in the prior one. I didn't mention that we have done a multi-use path 10 foot wide where bicycles and pedestrian can use it. In this one, we separated them. We kept the sidewalk along the north side of the Parkway, and then we have the bicycle lane on street with the general traffic. And then in this area, there is a crossing for vehicle turning right, and then the bicycle lane will stay between the through movements and then the right turn movements. Again, the same kind of signal phasing, again, to provide for that protection. This concept number 3 is again, this is kind of the actually concept number 4. Let me see. Yeah, for concept number 4 is very drastic. Again, is that we put in, what if we make everybody coming down on Melrose Street and turning right instead of the turning left or through, and the bicycle the same way, they're going to be turning right. And also on Crystal Street, they will turn right only on Melrose Street. And then that section, section of Melrose Street, the south side, will become a one-way from between the Parkway and Main Street. And in this concept is basically the same, where we have the multi-use path of 10 feet wide, where bicycles and pedestrian can use it for this segment between Main Street and Melrose Street. I know there was another concept, just going to go back, sorry. And number 3, the other change we had on concept number 3 is what at the Duncan, we proposed to close this driveway that's near the intersection and then convert the other driveway that was in only to two-way traffic. So that was a change from the existing condition. And concept 4, again, we don't have a signal proposed. It will become a stop condition for Melrose Street. Just one segment of Melrose Street will be a stop condition. The other one, because it's one way away from the intersection, it does not require any control. With that, I'll turn it back to Dan.
Thanks, Faisal. So actually, could we go to the next slide first? I would like to first just talk a little bit about additional information about this meeting. So this concludes the presentation portion of the meeting, and we're going to move into the discussion next. Just for sake of everyone's time, if there are people that would like to post public comment in the next 2 weeks, you can submit them online, mass.gov/DCR/public-comment. We're going to be taking public comments for the next 2 weeks, but this is an opportunity for you all to speak to us now about your initial reactions towards this plan, and you can participate in the discussion and Q&A portion in 2 ways. You can type questions into the Q&A at the bottom, or you can raise your hand using the Zoom functionality. I noticed that we just have 2 questions in now. Faisal, if we could go back to the discussion slide, just so that we can keep the discussion focused on the different areas. We've also labeled this map A through G, so that you can more easily talk about where intersections and streets, layouts and such, so that I can help focus your discussion. So I'm going to move to the Q&A, and also I would like to take a moment very quickly to thank the elected officials that have joined us today, and give them an opportunity to speak if they would like to do so. So I noticed that Senator Lewis is on the call, and I've noticed Rep. Lipper Garabedian is on the call as well, and I've noticed a couple of Melrose officials are on the call as well. So I noticed that it was Martha Grover, Mark Garape, and Elena, sorry, missing your name here. So Elena Ellis. I just want to thank everyone who's joined the call. If you'd like to have a moment to speak, if you're an elected official, please just raise your hand and I can unmute you, and we can have a moment. So I noticed that Senator Lewis has raised their hand, so I'm going to allow them to talk now. Okay, so I have to promote you to a panelist, Senator, so now you can speak.
Thanks, Dan. Good evening, everyone. I just wanted to say how much we appreciate that DCR is making this project a priority. I think we all recognize, how unsafe this intersection is for children and for adults alike, whether they're driving, biking, or walking. So we're very pleased that it's getting all this attention. I want to thank my colleague, Representative Lipper Garabedian, for her strong advocacy for this project, as well as Mayor Broder, of course, and Councilor Garape and other city officials. It's truly a city and state partnership we have here. And I also want to thank all the Melrose residents who have been paying close attention and provided feedback after the first public meeting. And of course, we hope you will continue to provide your feedback based on these conceptual designs tonight. And I very much look forward to settling on a design and getting the construction completed, over the next year. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator. And now I'm going to unmute Representative Garrett. I'm going to allow to talk.
Great. Thank you so much. It's good to be with you. I hope you can hear me. And I just wanted to echo what the senator mentioned. I'm glad to have this time today to hear from folks who have joined us, and I certainly will assist with promoting the opportunity to submit public comments in the coming 2 weeks. I'd also just like to acknowledge the strong work of our DPW director, Elena Proakis Ellis. She and I worked together years ago now on some complete streets modifications to this intersection. So the city has really been leading on this, and I'm glad that there's a great partnership with the state as well to think about how we can improve safety for all folks who are accessing this important area of our city. And I know the mayor likewise has been thinking about this critically, including how this is going to fit into the larger ecosystem of other intersections that are nearby. And that initial slide was really helpful for providing some context for this location, which obviously will get some important attention. And we want to just be mindful of how it will interface with the other intersection we can see right here on this slide. And of course, the Green Street intersection as well. So thank you.
Thanks, Representative. So now I'm going to go back to the Q&A portion. I noticed one of the attendees asked if they could have the links in the chat. So I just posted one of the links to them so that if anyone would like to just click on the link, you can click it there, and then that's where you can submit in our public comments. So that's in the answered portion of the Q&A now. I would also like to take a moment to thank Councillor John Tramontozzi, who has joined us as well. It seems as if they have joined with one of the other councillors' links, which can happen occasionally. So just want to thank them for joining us as well. And if you would like to speak, I would just need you to raise your hand so that I can identify which mark it is that I would need to unmute. So there's the raise hand function. Oh, there we go. Oh, I missed you. If you could raise your hand again, I can unmute you, but okay, there we go. Allow to talk. And now you would, yep.
Was that me? Sorry about that.
Yeah, I muted you because you were getting a lot of feedback on your mic. So I'll give you another opportunity, but if there's a lot more feedback again, I see another hand risen, so I'm actually gonna go to them first. Okay, yep, I think we can hear you now.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yep.
All right, thank you. I apologize for the technical difficulty I had. I'm coming in on the Councilor Mark Garapay's link. He was kind enough to send that to me earlier today. Unfortunately, I think I may have cut him off then. I hope he's joining us because he did say that he was going to be present as well. But anyways, I wanted to thank you and thank the Massachusetts Department of Conservation and Recreation. It is of concern to me. This is my ward, part of my ward, and I do intend to follow this through. I like the concepts that you're proposing. I don't know which one yet, but I think it's excellent that we can share the information you provided to us, get an opportunity for other residents to make any comments and to fully examine the proposals. And I agree this is a very difficult intersection and traveled through it many times each day. So I appreciate all the work that the DCR is doing on this. Thanks. Thank you again very much.
Thanks, Councillor. I would also like to thank City Councillor Lila Migliorelli, who's on the call as well. So thank you. I noticed that I just got a chat on that, and then it seems that Mayor Brodeur has joined us as well. So I'm going to be unmuting people as they raise their hands. So I noticed that another councillor has risen their hand, so I'm going to allow them to speak now. And then you can unmute yourself.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. This is Mark Garapay. I appreciate you coming forward with 4 different options. And I do have a question, and hopefully you can discuss, just to give some clarification as we go through this process. It looks like most of the options are to add a light at the corner of the Fells Way and Melrose Street. But could you explain a little bit more? I know they had talked about when they press the crosswalk light, it's going to shut that down. It's going to stop all the traffic. How does that affect as it's going east up the Fells Way? And someone had talked about signal phasing. If you could just educate me a little bit on that process. I'm sure there's a lot of residents to it. Anyone that drives down that way knows over the years that it does back up into the intersections, especially up on Green Street and in the Fells Way. But I'd like to hear a little bit more as the process goes along on how the signal phasing goes in order to make sure that there's no backup at these intersections, especially, it's a different timing during school release and in the morning when it's going to school. Are the lights longer? So I'd like to hear more about that as we get through the process. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone have, can anyone answer that, or just some comments on that from the team?
I can add something on that. So we in 3 out of 4 concept on 3, we are proposing to signalize the intersection. So basically the signalized intersection, it operates in 3 phasing. One phase will be for Lynn Fells Parkway, eastbound, westbound, they goes together. On second phase, exclusive paired phase that we are talking about. So when somebody press the button for exclusive paired phase, all the vehicle phase will get the red signal, and the pedestrian phase will be timed as such that to provide the enough time to clear the crosswalk. And third phase will be for Melrose Street going southbound and northbound.
Jeff, do you want me to talk about progression, or do you want to do that?
Oh, boy.
Or I could.
Yeah, let's have Adina do it. What Councilor Garrett is asking about is what traffic engineers call traffic signal coordination among several different intersections. And Adina can explain what that is, what it means to us, and why it's important for us to be careful about it.
Sure. So signal coordination, first of all, requires that all of the intersections in that system have the same cycle length. And so this is just jumping ahead a little bit, but to answer about what happens when the pedestrian phase is called. So we have a set amount of time for each signal cycle. And there's a certain amount of time allotted to each of the vehicle phases and the pedestrian phase, according to the volume demand and the best way to balance the vehicles using the capacity of the intersection. So in any cycle where the pedestrian phase is called, then that amount of the cycle is allotted to the pedestrian phase. And whenever it's not called, that same amount of time is then reallocated to the other vehicle phases. So it's accounted for that way. And so basically whenever there isn't a pedestrian there, the vehicles just get more green time. And to address progression in more general terms, first I want to mention that under existing conditions, our traffic model, which we did in Synchro and Sim Traffic, does show backups in the morning westbound on Lynn Fells Parkway between the 2 existing signalized intersections. And it shows backups in the afternoon eastbound that spill back into the project intersection at Melrose Street with a significant queue that extends beyond the intersection. And that reflects the observed conditions. So in each of the proposed concepts, we're able to optimize signal timings and coordinate traffic signals in such a way that it reduces those queuing and spillback issues to varying degrees across the 4 different concepts. So coordinating the signals at these intersections is key to improving the traffic operations. So let me first speak to concepts 1 through 3, which are the ones that propose to signalize the project intersection, which would make it then 3 signalized intersections in sequence. Concept 4 has only the 2 existing traffic signals in sequence, but the same principles apply. So signal coordination on a corridor is typically implemented to reduce the number of stops and the amount of signal delay for vehicles on the corridor. But this project has the added complexity of the intersections being closely spaced together. So the goal of coordination in this case is not just to reduce the stops and signal delay, but it's also to manage the queuing on the legs in the middle of the intersection sequence to avoid spillback that would block adjacent intersections and create what we call wasted green time, which is when the signal is green, but there are no vehicles entering the intersection. And specifically in this case, it's when the signal is green, but vehicles are unable to enter the intersection because either it is blocked or the queue on the leg in front of them, it extends all the way to the intersection that they're at, so they're unable to proceed without blocking the intersection themselves. And wasted green time can result in poor operations. So in optimizing the coordination, which is done by adjusting the relative offsets of the start of the signal cycle at each of the intersections in the system, we can have the eastbound and westbound phases turn green around the same time for each of the 3 intersections. That's a bit of a simplification of how it works, but that's the general principle. Then ideally, through moving vehicles on Lynn Fells Parkway are able to move through all 3 intersections without stopping in between. That's what we would call progression. In reality, some vehicles might have to stop in the middle legs, but the signal behind them would turn red, stopping more vehicles from entering the intersection, entering that leg, and keeping the queue on the middle leg shorter than the leg itself to allow room for vehicles on the cross street turning into that leg without them blocking the intersection. Now, several factors can complicate optimization of signal coordination, not the least of which is balancing the needs of the traffic streams in both the eastbound and westbound directions simultaneously.
Yeah,
Generally, priority is given to the prevailing direction of traffic in each peak period, which here is westbound in the morning and eastbound in the afternoon. So all that said, just a quick summary of how each of these concepts performs in terms of the ability to coordinate the signals and create that progression to manage the queues and minimize the spillback and wasted green time. Concepts 1 and 4 basically do the best. They can significantly reduce the westbound queuing spillback in the morning peak period. And in the afternoon, they manage pretty well the eastbound queue to avoid the spillback. But there's still a queue that forms west of Melrose Street, and that can get kind of long. Concept 2 is pretty similar in the afternoon, but in the morning, it has some issues with westbound queuing, where the queue to the east of Green Street can be long. And in concept 4, where the project intersection at Melrose Street is left unsignalized, it can have good westbound operations in the morning with little issues with queuing. And actually the eastbound queue in the afternoon looks similar to the other concepts, except now there's actually spillback into the Melrose Street intersection, just like the existing. And actually I should mention concept 3, which we would have to convert the westbound Main Street, the westbound approach of Lynn Fells Parkway to Main Street to have only 1 through lane, where right now it has 2 general purpose lanes, both of which accommodate the through traffic. One of those would have to be converted to an exclusive turn lane, either the left one into a left turn lane, right one into the right turn lane. Long story short, the right turn lane, converting that works better, but that means that there's only 1 lane that accommodates the through traffic. And so it generates more of a queuing issue because you have the capacity for through vehicles on that leg. And so it spills back onto Green Street more and causes more of a queuing issue behind it. Now, we have the capability for each of these concepts to adjust the offsets in the field after it is built, or whichever one we theoretically would build, and we would adjust it based on the actual traffic flows experienced in the corridor at that time. So each of these can be tweaked and fine-tuned to work potentially better than the traffic model even currently indicates. So I hope that answers the question and wasn't too complicated.
You can get a sense for the depth and complexity of the design challenge here, but Adina's up to the task. Her job, in summary, is to turn all the lights green at once if you're driving along the parkway, so you don't have to stop 3 times. Yeah. Ideally, you wouldn't have to stop often at all. And just to close the question that Councilor Garrett asked, the signals are run by a tiny computer, which are completely and fully programmable. So you can have a different program for any time of day, any day of week. You can even do special events if you wanted to. We could have a special program for football games or plays or concerts at the school. You can do whatever you want. It's that's the flexibility that you have there. And the most important part of that is that after we choose to build a signal here and after it's built, we will remain on site for several weeks after it, making adjustments in real time. So we'll watch the school operation in the morning and the afternoon and afternoon rush hour to make the adjustments that you need that aren't caught by the model. And you can make any programming changes you want, anytime you want, to make up for anything that you missed during the design process. That's the beauty of having a traffic signal. It's completely changeable.
Okay, thank you. Just one other question. You'd mentioned that the light at Main Street in the Fellsway and Green Street at the Fellsway were owned by the city of Melrose. Would the city of Melrose be owning the new light if they went that route? And once these are all installed and after the DCR has done all their work and integrating it all in, does the city of Melrose then maintain all these, or is it done by both the DCR and the city of Melrose? And can the city of Melrose change that on their own if there was functions at the school?
Right now, what we have proposed to do, and it's a little bit early in the process, but we have proposed on the intersection here at Melrose Street that DCR would design, build, and own and operate the signal here. However, if that arrangement is not the right one, if there is a better one and the city would like to be involved in operating the signal, we would be open to that, certainly. We have that arrangement in other places. Most notably, the city of Boston operates many of our signals and is on their centralized computer system, and that arrangement works very well. So if that's something that we think is the best arrangement, we can talk about that later on in the design development process. But for what we're talking about tonight, we're committed to funding the design and the construction of it. We can discuss the operation as well.
Thank you very much. Thanks. Thank you for all your work and all the options. If I have any more questions, I'll feed them through email. Thank you.
Thanks, Counselor. And I just want to take a quick moment to go back to introductions. I want to make sure that we properly introduce the mayor, Mayor Brodeur. I know that you're on the call. If you'd like to speak, I'm going to allow you to talk, which won't unmute you. So you can have the ability to unmute yourself if you'd like to jump in at any point and say a few words. I just wanted to make sure that you were properly introduced, because I know that there's been a lot of back and forth between introductions, and I just wanted to give you that opportunity as well. So.
Thank you, Dan. I really appreciate it. I was going to ask a specific question, but Councilor Garrett anticipated the question, so I'm all set in terms of specifics. But I very much appreciate DCR's efforts to move on this. It has been something that the community, particularly the school community, has been interested in a long time, as you all know, and just looking forward to moving ahead. But thank you.
Thanks, Mayor. And now there's been a hand risen for a little while from another counselor. So, Counselor, I'm gonna allow you to talk, which won't unmute you, and then you can unmute yourself and say a few words if you'd like.
Thank you, Dan. Can you hear me well?
Yep.
Great. Thank you so much for providing this presentation. I know this intersection has been a long issue for a long time. particularly with the safety of students crossing to go to the high school and the middle school. As you know, many of you all know that the children in Melrose that attend these schools tend to walk there from very far away. So it's nice to come up with some accommodations for that, as well as people who are shopping in the nearby plaza as well. As Mayor Broder just stated, Councilor Garrett did ask one of my questions. I think just a follow-up clarification, I think it was from Adina, are we to say that if there's no, I think it's option number 5 that has no signal, that obviously that may, did she say, lead to some backup towards Green Street, if I was understanding her correctly? And that's question number 1. And then number 2, which may be just more of a comment, or perhaps the mayor can add something about, I've had some questions from constituents about how this project relates to the Lpn Feasibility Study and some of the proposed developments to that area, which is a city project. Thank you.
All right, I could jump in on the question about the queuing with the unsignalized concept. That's concept 4. And what I was describing was the eastbound in the afternoon is where we have the queuing issue, because as long as the project intersection remains unsignalized, there's no way to meter the vehicles entering that intersection. So there's spillback from the queue from the adjacent intersection at Main Street, and vehicles basically have to meter themselves by, following the traffic rules to not block the intersection. So they shouldn't be entering, but they do, and they could be blocking the intersection for vehicles wanting to turn from Melrose Street onto Lynn Fells Parkway. But westbound in the morning, the queuing is fine.
Yeah,
Thank you.
If you can add to that, in terms of having the intersection unsignalized, that does not address the safety for the kids crossing the street, basically. And so.
One other follow-up to that part is signage. I know that in some communities where you have, don't enter this, do not block, that sometimes it's painted on the ground, or, signage up along the roadways. Is that proven to be effective? Is that one something that could be put in place to help prevent blocking the intersection, or is that just additive that doesn't really work?
Yeah, the do not block the box basically has been successful in some areas and has not been successful in many other areas as well. It depends on the the area and the drivers, respect to the rules of the traffic, of the area. So some areas you'll find nobody really pay attention to them, and we experience a lot of that, like within the city of Boston itself. And some areas they work just fine. People are respectful of the rules, so they stop before the box.
If I could address the Lpn question that Councilor had. Good question. We have not any coordination with the city on Lpn yet in the meetings that we've had, and I'm not familiar with the scope of the Lpn work, but I think that we should talk about it. It's right at the other end of Crystal Street, so we should understand what that is and how it relates to what we're doing, and to see if there's anything that we need to know with regard to our design to make sure that we're not, that there's no clashing of projects here. So I'm glad that you mentioned that. And I will ask, I'll start tomorrow and ask Public Works what we need to do next.
Thank you.
Thanks, Counselor. So just quickly back to the Q&A. So Faisal, do you think you could go back to the 4 options and quickly highlight the differences by some of them? One of the questions that came in was asking if we could just go back for a few seconds to display them so that people can kind of have a better understanding of where the design concepts change places. And then another question that came in was that when we're discussing concepts, if we can move back to them interchangeably, but while we answer any other questions that come in. So if we could just quickly go through the 4 again, and then this will give everyone another opportunity to either raise their hands or type questions in the Q&A, because at the moment, those were the last two that we have. So if anyone else wants to jump in, let us know and we can get back to it. But Faisal, if you could just quickly highlight them, I'd appreciate it. Thanks.
Yeah, just I'm going to go back to the existing condition and then point out a couple things, basically. So if you look at the intersection itself right now, you don't see any kind of markings for bicycles accommodations, right? None of that exists today. And also there is a little island on Melrose Street, and that's be taken out to kind of provide us with adequate space to provide the lane that we needed, like the exclusive bicycle lanes and also the lane configuration with the appropriate lane width. If you look at the section between Melrose and Main, for example, as I said, those lanes were the width of them kind of substandard in our opinion. And so we made an effort to kind of bring them up to standard, which is 10.5 feet wide. The other thing is we do have sidewalks, and we're trying to utilize those sidewalks as well, reconstruct them, and then have different use for them. For example, in the concept number 1 for the sidewalk between Main Street and Melrose Street, again, we're building a shared use path with the kind of being used by pedestrian and bicycles at the same time. And that's 10 feet wide. So it's really a little bit wider than a sidewalk, even double the width of a sidewalk sometimes. And then reconstructing, all the pedestrian ramps to make them compliant with current standards. And also areas that we have, like the green areas, we kind of introduce or maintain a green space within the intersection. So, and then as you can see on Melrose Street, that island is out, and we're providing again, bicycle lanes on both sides. And I know it's the kind of short distance within the limit of this intersection. However, and we kind of have to start somewhere sometime. And when you build something and then you add to it later, and then you'll find that things can go much smoother. For bicycles, on the parkway, as you can see, they're mostly shallow. We don't have exclusive bicycle lanes. And then if you're coming, let's say westbound on the parkway, and then you want to turn left, there is what we call the bicycle box, turning box. The bicyclist or cyclists can go to it and wait for the signal, and then they can cross from that. So between marking, signing, and other things, we kind of make things more functional. And then across an intersection, as you can see, we put those zebra lines to allow, to kind of bring awareness for the bicycle lanes, for the traffic to see that there are bicyclists. So this concept 2 is really we go back to the sidewalk, and then we have the on the parkway, all the bicycles will be shallow, so they travel with the traffic, and we maintain the same configuration on Melrose as exclusive bicycle lanes. However, the major difference is really in here at Crystal Street and Melrose Street. We said, what if we close it? And then again, that eliminates a lot of conflict points, as we said initially, that removing conflict points that improve safety and improve operation sometimes. So from this concept, Crystal Street has to take a right on Melrose and then go to Main Street to come back, basically. And again, I don't want to go into the traffic aspect of it, because there's the pluses and minuses sometimes. I mean, we're talking about the good stuff, that we're improving, eliminating conflict points. However, we are diverting traffic that used to exit, for example, in here, now it has to go to Main Street. So we're kind of loading more traffic on Main Street. That become an issue from an operation as well, and the queuing that we have been talking about. So on concept 3, as you can see, that the bicycle lane instead of Sharrow, we have a bicycle lane on the Parkway between Main Street and Melrose Street. And that bicycle lane goes along the curbside, and then it comes back to the left of the right turn lane. So we'll have an exclusive right turn lane that goes from the Parkway up Melrose Street. And then the bicycle lane will be against the through movements, basically, as you can see in here. And as I said before, the major difference is really closing that Duncan driveway. I mean, that has been the focal point for us. You know, usually when you have a driveway at the intersection or near the intersection, it complicates the operation and then compromise sometimes safety. So if we are able to close that, and then we have to provide them with access and egress, and this driveway can be widened to provide for the two-way flow in and out, basically, in this area. Other driveways are the same. We're not touching anything, basically, and then meeting all the requirements for ADA and the pedestrian crossings. So the fourth one is that's when we don't have a signal introduced in here. We have a stop condition on Melrose, similar to what we have today. However, the difference is now we are making Melrose Street between the Parkway and Main Street at a one-way away from the intersection. So basically, anybody who is coming from Crystal now Street has to take a right, similar to the previous one when we closed it off entirely. But now they have markings, and then they have signs, and then they are required to turn right and then go to Main Street. Similarly, if you're coming down on Melrose Street, making everybody to turn right on the Parkway westbound, and then nobody turns left. So in retrospect, you're really eliminating so many conflicts, basically. I mean, in theory, it looks great, but however, there's other ramification, as we said, in terms of detouring traffic and then sending it someplace else to come back. And then sometime again, it impacts those intersections, Main Street. If the critical movement was on Main Street itself, now you're adding more volume to turn left from here, then it becomes an issue. So you kind of have, it's a balancing act, and I'm sure eventually we will find the best solution that addresses all the issue, the operational issue, safety issue, and then the desire of the community, what they like to see. And that's it. Thanks.
Thanks, Faisal. So that has helped us re-spark some of the questions in the Q&A. So we've gotten a number of comments that come in. So I'm going to read the comments in the Q&A first, because this is a recorded public meeting, so they're part of the record. So William Ryan says a couple of comments here. So I'm going to read his comments, and then we're going to go to the risen hands so that they have an opportunity to speak. And then I'm going to go back to the Q&A for the written questions that were provided. So William Ryan here says, please make a better ultimate design than the dangerous one created at Lynn Fells Parkway in Lincoln. It's very dangerous. So thanks for the comment. And then there are two more I see here from you. So you say that you only move the traffic flow on frustrating drivers by making Crystal one way to Melrose Street. So that's a very valid opinion from a driver in the area. So we appreciate the comment again. And then I'm going to go to the last one. It says, I don't think you would want to travel these streets under a few of these options. So again, this is a very valuable opinion from someone who may be driving the street. So we appreciate the comments, William. And now that I've read those comments, I'm going to move back to the risen hand portion. I see that we now have 4 hands. So I'm going to go through these 4 hands, and then I'll go back to the Q&A where there are some written questions for our staff here. So I'm going to go to Brian Gregory. So Brian, I'm going to allow you to talk, and then you can unmute yourself and ask a question to the staff here.
Sure, thank you. Hi, Brian Gregory here, Melrose resident over in West Wyoming. I just wanted to voice my support for, I believe, option 2. Just thinking about the complexity of the intersection, I think from a safety standpoint, anything that can reduce the amount of potential conflicts between turning vehicles and others. I know this is a really sort of scary intersection that I drive through with some frequency, and I just think that being able to sort of reduce the amount of complexity there would help with that. I would love to see this one maybe paired with having the Dunkin' Donuts option where they have a consolidated driveway as well. It just, again, further reducing the amount of conflicts and potential collision points along there would be great. Additionally, anything that can happen to sort of continue the bike lanes. There's, a really nicely demarcated bike lanes along Lynn Fells Parkway headed westbound past Main Street, and then, previous, coming up the hill from West Wyoming over towards the high school there. And then in that middle stretch, it sort of falls apart a little bit. They currently have it choked down for the replacement of the rail bridge there. So there's obviously space that they were able to co-opt in that area for the staging. It would be great if, again, those bike lanes could just continue to be extended so that experience is more contiguous. And then maybe a last thing, which may be a little out of the scope of this, but is just one intersection over at Main and Lynn Fells Parkway. I'll just mention that in the current configuration, there's 2 lanes on Lynn Fells Parkway headed westbound at Main Street. And then when you cross Main Street, it becomes that the right-hand one is a turn only to Melrose Street, and the left-hand one continues on straight to Lynn Fells Parkway. Just something I've noticed a lot there is that people tend to queue up in the right-hand lane at the intersection with Main Street heading westbound. And then when they cross the street, either knowingly or unknowingly realize it's a turn only onto Melrose and wanted to continue onto Lynn Fells Parkway. And so have only that 300 feet there to sort of merge back into the traffic that's continuing straight. So anything that maybe can be considered within this reconfiguration or timing of the 3 intersections to sort of stop that, whether it be creating the right-hand lane turn only when you're approaching Main Street headed west on Lynn Fells, or some other method might just reduce that, because I've had a couple of people sort of just cut me off hardcore because they don't want to go onto Melrose Street. But otherwise, I really appreciate you looking at this. And again, I'd support, tying this into the improvements on L Pond holistically. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. And just a great comment regarding going west from Main onto Lynn Fells Parkway. It's very helpful for us to hear comments like that as we're taking these things into consideration. Hearing the support for concept 2 sort of integration with the Dunkin' Donuts Parkway. So we really appreciate your comment, Brian. And we're going to move to the next commenter here. I see Jeff. Jeff, I'm going to allow you to talk, and then you can unmute yourself if you'd like to say a few words.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, thank you all for providing this forum. I think this is great. I live about 4 blocks north of here and walk here many times a week, and drive here more in the winter than in the summer. And I'd like to thank, all of the local reps, Jason Lewis, Kate, and John, and Mayor Brodeur for showing up. And Brian, I really agree with all the things that you pointed out. And Adina, thank you very much for the detailed description about how lights work. That's that gives me some confidence that somebody's thinking about these things. I think the first scenario is probably the best, but like Brian said, I really like the aspect of number 2 being with Crystal Street being blocked off, being much safer for pedestrians. And as I walk through this intersection, I feel like the biggest threat is having to look over my shoulder at a very hard angle. I cross most often at that lower left corner, and that oblique angle is challenging from a pedestrian point of view. Yeah, exactly. Just underneath the green of the light, and having to look over your shoulder to make sure that no one's turning left into you or coming at high speed down the Lynn Fells Parkway feels like a very vulnerable spot as a pedestrian. On number 3, I really like Brian said, I really like the idea of reducing the entrances and exits from Dunkin' Donuts. It feels like as a pedestrian and even as a driver, having to pay so much attention to so many sort of threat points is, if we can reduce those, that would be useful. And then on your number 4, I really don't like the no light, and I really don't like the right turn only out of Melrose Street. And I think those are my only comments.
Thanks, Jeff. Really appreciate the comments here. And so I'd just like to remind everyone that we're going to be going until 7:30 tonight. So we still have a fair amount of time if people would like to provide more comment. We're going to have 2 more speakers, 2 more questions, and then any more that come in, we can address them during this time. So thanks again for your comment, Jeff. And I'm going to move to Garrett. So Garrett, I'm going to allow you to talk, and you can unmute yourself when you're ready.
Great, thanks. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Great. I'm Garrett Nelson. I live on Linden Road, so just off of the right-hand side of this screen, on the other side of Green Street. I come through this way all the time in all modes, so driving, biking, and walking. I'm often going this way with my toddler daughter as well, so well aware of the challenges of this intersection. I was really encouraged to hear at the very outset that DCR is not just committed to moving cars, but I have to say I don't totally see that commitment in these design concepts. This is a really difficult intersection to navigate by bike. And because of that, it basically creates an east-west wall through Melrose, where you have to go up to Franklin, north of here, or all the way down to Emerson, south of here, to get across Main Street. I don't think sharrows are acceptable bike infrastructure in this case. It's a fast-moving, busy intersection. I'm a very comfortable biker, biking in traffic, and I do not feel comfortable biking with sharrows here. So for that reason, I would say that concept 3 is by far my preferred alternative, in that it does introduce separated bike infrastructure in both directions. I don't love the crossing lane westbound, but it's better than nothing. I really don't think that I forget if it was 1 or 2, just having a wide sidewalk really counts as a shared use path, unless that wide sidewalk actually has markings and separations to indicate pedestrian and bicycle flows. So I think concept 3 does by far the best job at moving non-car traffic through this intersection. I would actually love to see a combination of 2 and 3. I think it would make this look a lot more like a parkway if that closure on Melrose Street was done, and then in addition to that, the narrowing of that section between Melrose, or the dropping of a few of the car travel lanes that is in concept 3. So I'd love to see those 2 concepts merge together. I think that would make it look like a parkway and function like a parkway. I get the concerns with traffic. I love to bike, but I drive through here all the time. I have to say I would be perfectly comfortable queuing and waiting more often if the net is that this is a safer intersection for walkers and bikers, and for kids especially. My kids, I expect, will go to Melrose Middle School in a couple of years. And I'd really like to see this a place that I would feel comfortable sending a 10 or a 12-year-old down by bike or walking. So I think design concept 4 is really unacceptable. I don't think that the stoplight will control drivers coming down Melrose Street. The stop sign. I think people will barrel right out across the pedestrian crosswalk there. And I guess last thing, I think it was Brian who had mentioned the real problem with drivers coming westbound, finding themselves in the right turn only lane as it currently exists, and then dangerously getting left as fast as they can because they want to be going straight onto the parkway. And I think in design 3, that would solve that problem by limiting westbound traffic to a single lane crossing the intersection. So yeah, those are my comments. I'm really glad to see DCR taking all these modes into consideration. And yeah, I'd really like to see that commitment move forward, not only with this intersection, but throughout the parkway. That's it, thanks.
Thanks, Garrett. Your comment about really liking concept 3 and then maybe having some integration with concept 2, focusing on the bike facilities that we have here, and saying that you don't like concept 4. These are really helpful comments for us and our team. So we really appreciate you raising your hand and providing your comment this way. So thanks again. And I'm gonna move to Finn now. So Finn, I'm gonna allow you to talk. Oh, right before I allow Finn to talk, I've noticed that there are some chatters. And I would like to mention now that if you could put your questions from the chat into the Q&A will be part of the recorded session, but the chat, not everyone who's participating in the meeting are gonna be able to see the chat. So if you can move those to the Q&A, that'd be terrific. So Finn, I'm gonna allow you to talk now, and then you can unmute yourself when you're ready.
Thanks, everybody. I really, like everyone has said, I really appreciate the thought that's gone into this. These are 4 really interesting options. I agree with everything everyone has said so far, so I won't go over it. And I just kind of wanted to point out a couple of pain points that we have biking the area. And so I'll refer to the discussion, where we have the letter references. For me, the big problems with the existing conditions are, if you're going west, like if you're coming down Melrose Street, as though you're going towards Whole Foods, it's really, really difficult when you get to the intersection of Lynn Fells to look right and to see vehicles coming westbound. There's usually people queuing up to take a left, and that's going uphill. So your view is really, really obscured. That feels really dangerous to make that move and shoot across that intersection. So we always kind of have have to choose, right? When we're going down up Main Street, north on Main Street, and going to Whole Foods, say, do you go down Melrose Street and do you take it into your hands to shoot across Lynn Fells? Or do you go to the intersection, the existing intersection of Main and Lynn Fells, and do you navigate the kind of the lack of a left-hand turn? So one thing I'd really be interested in seeing, and it's great to hear that you're going to be working so closely with the city, is what do we really want cyclists to be doing here to get into the plaza? Do we want to encourage them, down Melrose Street towards this intersection, which is being reconfigured, or we want to encourage them at the Main Street Lynn Fells intersection, which I really think if we were going to do that, I'd want to see the city looking into a left turn arrow there, with a bike box. There's a lot of really great bike boxes that exist lower on Main Street. Those are like my favorite part of biking in Melrose, is being able to get into the bike boxes and be visible. And so to have one here at that intersection of Main and Lynn Fells, I think would be a big win. The other thing I want to say is, a couple of the options, the Sharrows going, let's see, westbound on Lynn Fells. And then if we do have traffic open going the same direction on Melrose Street, both of those are uphills. And they're if you're, for a lot of cyclists, they're relatively steep uphills. And I really agree that Sharrows create an extremely unsafe feeling when you're going uphill there. It's a little bit different going downhill. It's a lot more comfortable. But when you're going uphill on those 2 approaches, to be able to have something separated, I think is going to be way more inviting for children, for families, for women, for less experienced cyclists. I really strongly advise against having Sharrows going on those uphills, those segments. And then the last comment I'll make, because I haven't heard it tonight, the concept of closing off that intersection in Design 2 is really interesting to me, but I worry that the fire department is not going to like it. All right, I think I remember from the original meeting, because there's a fire station down on Tremont. I think they come down Melrose Street towards this intersection with some frequency. And so I don't know if there's something that can be, if maybe DCR talked to them, I don't know, or this would actually really be a hardscape or something. But I want to know if this is I think to let us know this is a legitimate option that really could happen. Has the fire department been consulted there? Because if that's going to be some sort of hardscape plaza in conjunction with a signal, then maybe you can encourage cyclists to go down Melrose Street and actually utilize that pedestrian signal in some cases. So that's really it. Just wanted to point out my experiences using this. And thank everyone for the time. Thank you.
Thanks, Finn. And is anyone on the project team who could maybe speak to the concerns regarding the fire station? Is there, do we know if there's been any sort of coordination on that, or?
Dan, generally with work like this, we would go to the fire department right after we have this discussion about the concepts. So this is a good time, right? This next step, we would start having those discussions. So public safety, first responders, we would be talking with them about that. And there was a question I saw in the chat of the Q&A earlier about a raised table here. Let's say we build number 4 with no signal. Can we do a raised table? And for those of you who don't know what a raised table is, it would be taking the entire middle of the intersection and raising it up to the same level as the curb. And what that effectively does is it gives you something to drive up and over. Traditionally called a raised intersection, which has been used in other communities as a traffic calming device. It is effective in reducing speed and improving pedestrian safety, but fire departments, fire chiefs don't tend to support them very much because it does reduce their response time. If Melrose Street or the Parkway is used as a primary response route or even a secondary response route for the fire department and other first responders, in my experience with road design and traffic calming, generally they do not support that on those routes. So it's an important consideration. And if there is support for concept 2, then absolutely, we need to have an extended conversation with the fire department about what that means for their response, particularly because I would imagine that this is their response route to the high school. And that is obviously a very sensitive receptor.
Thanks, Jeff. And yeah, that's a really helpful context for how this process goes with regard to the first responders. And Finn, thanks again for bringing that up. It's a very important question, as well as your comments regarding the turn angles and the elevated hills and such as you're going up and down these intersections as well as normally trying to traverse them. So it's a great comment, and we appreciate you participating. Also, Jeff had answered Bruce's open Q&A comment, so I moved that over to the answered. So thanks, Bruce, for providing that question as well. So now I'm gonna move over to Greg here. I noticed that Greg's had his hand raised for a little while, and then I'm gonna move back over to Councilor Garrett. So Greg, I'm gonna let you allow you to speak, so you can unmute yourself when you're ready.
Great, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Wonderful. I'd like to thank DCR and my local representatives, Mayor Broder, Senator Lewis, and Representative Garrett Bedini, for the attention being paid to the intersection. I live on Melrose Street at 99 Melrose Street, which is 7 houses up from the Rockland Trust Bank on the diagram there. I've lived there for 8 years, and I pre-pandemic commuted from Oak Grove 5 days a week to Boston, and on days that had wind chills, above 30 degrees, I would ride my bike to Oak Grove. So I'm very familiar with this intersection, and so I like concept number 2 the best. Somebody's already said, I can't remember who said it, but I like concept 2 with the Duncan being eliminating the exit from the Duncan and making that entrance an exit and an entrance. I think that would be better. Just in general, I mean, I avoid this intersection at all costs. The only time I really go on it is if I'm talking about when I'm driving, is if I have to go to Route 1 or if I have to go west or east on the Lynn Fells Parkway is the only reason I would go there. If I was going to go downtown, I would go to Tremont Street. I wouldn't go through this intersection from Melrose Street because it's not a fun experience as a driver and it feels dangerous. So my take is that the second one would be the best, but really I'm in favor of whatever of the options is going to have reduced the capacity of the intersection to overall traffic the most. Like whatever reduces the amount of cars going through the intersection from every access point is what I want. And that's for safety, and that's also just air quality and just overall quality of life, being someone who lives within less than 2,000 feet of the intersection. Yeah, just thanks. Any of these is going to be a huge improvement. So whatever we decide, I'm going to be happy with, but I support number 2 with a slight modification of eliminating the exit from the Duncan.
Thanks, Greg, for the comment. For voicing your support for concept 2. It's going to be really helpful for the team here, as well as mentioning the exit from the Duncan as well. I know that there's been a couple of comments about that tonight. So thanks again for raising your hand and speaking during this meeting. We really appreciate it. It's very helpful towards our process. So thanks again, Greg. And now I'm going to move back to the counselor here. So I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself, and you can unmute yourself when you're ready to speak.
Thank you. If we go to concept 2, just one more time. Has there been any study on how many cars will end up? A lot of times during high peak, they're going to take a right onto Melrose Street currently, or they're going to cross Melrose Street, across the Fellsway. Do we know how many additional cars are going to end up going east and then coming onto Main Street, and what that's going to do to the traffic flow on Main Street during peak times? And also, if part of this study, if concept 2 is the route that we end up going, are we going to have to extend that left arrow, the left lane turn going north on Main Street a little farther back with the additional cars by closing off Melrose Street? Right there, yeah. I'm wondering if we've done a study to see how many cars are going to be diverted left going east on the Fellsway and then onto Main Street. And same thing going north on Main Street. It's going to skip Melrose Street and go to the Fellsway.
Adina, do you want to speak to that? I know we have done the analysis basically for all 3 intersections as a coordinated system. And so we should have the data, the queuing data and level of service and, the volume to the capacity ratios. So we have all these variables already predetermined. However, we have not prepared a report. Typically, we're going to prepare a report where we sort things out and display it on figures and tables and so on. So I don't know if you want to add anything, Adina.
Yeah, so let's see, looking at that northbound left turn movement at the Main Street intersection, 122 additional vehicles in the morning peak hour, and 82 in the afternoon evening peak hour. And the other major movement for diverted vehicles would be the eastbound right, which has 109 in the morning and 88 in the afternoon. And let me pull up.
And Yeah, just not to interrupt you. That's for the duration of 1 hour, not, so all those 120, they will not be at the same time. So they will be spread over 1 hour, right?
Right, and there would be additional during the other hours of the day, even within the same peak period, but not the same, not if it's not that peak hour, there's still other vehicles.
Yep.
So, all right, let's see. For operations wise, what that does to it is the Main Street intersection ends up having pretty poor operations because of all those additional vehicles. In fact, to make it work, we'd have to work with the city to add a protected left phase for northbound, which currently only has permissive left, just the green ball, no green arrow. There is a green arrow for southbound, so it would just be adding the matching phase for northbound. So let's see, the overall level of service in each of the peak periods would be in the morning, it would be what we call level of service F, which is the worst level of service, and level of service E in the evening, just one step above it. And there would be some movements in each of the peak hours that have average delays well over 100 seconds. And it's a very different picture for concept 1 and concept 3, which have no diverted traffic, where that intersection operates at level of service D during both peak hours. So D being 2 steps above that level of service F. So just for comparison purposes, it does greatly decrease the operations to do that.
Okay, thank you. As Mr. McSweeney said, we have, the fire station down on Tremont Street that would cross over. We also have the hospital not too far, one set of light back too. So we want to make sure that, there's access in a timely manner for everyone during peak hours. But thank you all. Appreciate it.
I'm glad Councilor Garrett is here. He's asking all the tough traffic engineering questions. This is exactly where we wanted to be tonight. But just to echo what Adina said, we've been hearing some support for concept 2, and it is one of our probably our largest impact concept, and it looks great in a plan because we gain back all the green space in there. But I want to remind everyone that number 1, we haven't heard from anyone on Crystal Street yet, and this really affects their lifestyle because this is their only access out to the street network. And in addition, as Adina explained, we have a very heavy impact on traffic operations. So as we mentioned, the Main Street intersection is owned and operated by the city, and that puts a lot of additional left turns on their intersection, and that's a burden. So we would have to do some very heavy coordination. And of course, we talked about the fire department. So if we prefer this one, there would be a lot of work for us to do, a lot of coordination. And so not to say that it's not worth doing, but this option does present us with a pretty hefty set of trade-offs that we would have to work through during design development, just so you know.
Thanks, Jeff. So we're getting close to time, but I noticed that we still have another hand raised and a few comments and a question. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read the comments and Q&A. We're going to go back to the last hand risen, and then we're going to go to the last question. So Jim says that I think that option 4 is least desirable. A one-way Melrose Street with required right turn only to LFP westbound would promote illegal left turn into the exit of the Rockland Bank parking lot as an alternative to the long way around to Main Street. So thanks, Jim, for that. Just wanted to make sure that it was on the recording. Yeah, that voicing not liking concept 4. So Jeff says, I agree about the sharrows on the uphills. So thanks, Jeff, for that comment. We've gotten a lot of comments tonight about the sharrows and the harsh turn, the harsh angles where people would need to do these turns, as well as the difficulty of going up and down some of these hills. So thanks, Jeff, for that comment. Elena, I'm going to allow you to talk, and then you can unmute yourself when you're ready.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. I just wanted to comment on a couple of items from the city's perspective. So first of all, I wanted to point out that in the whole discussion about adding the additional traffic to Main Street for, I believe concepts 2 and 4 probably have a somewhat similar impact at the intersection of Main and Lynn Fells Parkway. And I just wanted to point out that that intersection is the highest crash location in the city. It's the only location that shows up on Mass DOT's list for their state list of high crash locations, the only Melrose location. And I know that concept 4 was one that I had requested to be analyzed, but hearing how it plays out with the traffic data, I think, Adina, maybe you can comment on whether it's fair to say that the concepts 2 and 4 have a similar impact at that intersection. But I think the city would have some serious concerns, even though I love the idea of reducing conflict points in the Melrose Street intersection. I think we really have to think hard about how that impacts the safety at an intersection that's already our least safe in the city. And then secondly, just a comment real quick on the Lpn Feasibility Study, since a few people brought that up. One of the major components of that study is additional multi-use paths around the Lpn Park site. And that could solve some of the need for bike accommodations through that area farther west on the parkway that is very challenging because of high school and middle school drop off and pickup and so many student drivers. So if we have an off-road path that runs on the city's side of the, actually no, down on the west side,
Right.
Yep, down there. That would potentially help with the bike accommodations if we have something off-road that runs that side of the street. And my last question is just since the report isn't all put together yet and we're hearing a lot of data tonight, I'm curious from both the traffic perspective from Adina and from just an overall vehicular safety perspective, I'm curious what the best options are of the 4 from the perspective of the engineers who've done the analysis.
I can start in with your question about the diverted vehicles into the intersection with Main Street. So the northbound left additional vehicles is exactly the same as for concept 2. But that is actually all the diverted traffic going through that intersection because of the Melrose Street now being one way, but still having access at the intersection. So no longer are vehicles having to divert through the Main Street intersection if they're looking to turn onto that leg of Melrose Street, because there is that access. So the eastbound right movement at Main Street has no additional vehicles. And so to answer your last question, from the traffic perspective, how each of these 4 concepts stack up, in terms of operations at the project intersection, operations at the intersection of Lynn Fells Parkway and Main Street, and as far as the potential for easing queuing and spillback by optimizing our coordination, concept 1 really stands out as the one that does each one of those best. There are some that, one and another concept might be kind of equal, but it's concept 1 that is actually good in all 3 of those regards.
Thank you.
Thanks. So we're approaching time, but there's only one question left. So we'll just answer this. And then actually the mayor just raised their hand. I'm gonna let the mayor speak. So I'm gonna let you unmute, and then if you would like to say something, and then we'll get the last question done, and then we'll end the meeting. So if the mayor would like to say something, you can unmute yourself now.
A little bit of a boring question, I suspect, but a lot of talk about closing off the Duncan access, which I totally get and would welcome. What I'm wondering about, if we know at this point, is what does it take to do that? Is that a private property issue? Is that something that has to be negotiated with Duncan? Or is that something that we can just do?
Val, who's listening, will correct me if I get this wrong, but from my understanding is that the existing curb cut access, the Dunkin' Donuts is entitled to retain their access. However, we are also entitled to build our parkway any way we want. So we have attempted to reach out to the Dunkin' Donuts people. We have not succeeded yet. We know that they would be interested in what we're doing, and we know that it would change their operation, at least as far as people driving to and from the store. It's my opinion that they would want to keep their access away from the stop bar, from the very edge of the intersection, because if you can imagine, now that we're stopping people, if we choose to build a signal, now that we're stopping people, it'd be very difficult for those vehicles to get out of the Dunkin' Donuts. So it'd be within their interest to exit in the rear of the property, where there would be some space behind the queue. So
that makes a lot of sense.
We'll try. We'll sit down with them if they respond. If they do not respond, we will not design around their parking lot or their driveway. We'll continue, and I think eventually, it may be as late as soon as the bulldozer arrives, but on the first day of construction, but we'll get their attention eventually.
We can help with contact, that's for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, you are correct, Jeff. And we can check internally if the double curb cut is actually permanent curb cut, or it's something just happened course of last 20, 30 years. So it will be legal, and you can check our plans, what's on file.
Thanks. And I would just like to mention as well that I've been working with our external affairs office to do that outreach with the Duncan, and we weren't able to get in contact with them, but again, we'll get their attention as it comes up. So thanks again for the question, Mayor Prodor. And yep. And I'm going to just read the last question now. Thanks everyone for staying on a little later. I know that we said it would go to 7:30, but so it's William Ryan has a question. Actually, Faisal, could you bring it to the discussion slide, because it has the letter indicators. Are crosswalks A, B, and F needed to be at the corners as shown? Could each be moved down each street away from the intersection? Could crosswalk A be moved down the street towards the central crosswalk from the Knoll? Has a roundabout like the one at the intersections of Green and Howard been considered? It seems to be working very well at that location. Would anyone want to take a shot at this one?
We're talking about this crosswalk, right? Crossing the parkway to move it back, right? Is that the question?
Need to be at the corners as shown. Could they move down each street away from the intersection? So it's
away from the intersection, right? Yeah. I think the goal is that, where we did some curb extension basically out, as you can see in both, is to reduce that distance, and then pushing it back, basically you really need to extend the same thing. And if let's say we have the crosswalk in here for vehicle turning right, it's not in their cone of vision right there that the pedestrian if they're standing at the curb line, or they sometimes they cross, they think that they can cross on the do not walk signal. So typically we like for the crosswalk to be as close as possible to the intersection, and then make it much better visibility for from the driver to the pedestrian.
That makes sense, Faisal. So thanks for the answer. And I just want to thank everyone again for staying on a little later. This was a very helpful public meeting for us to receive all these comments about your preferences for each of the different design concepts. Faisal, do you think you could go to the last slide so I can just talk about the follow-up? So just some additional information for everyone as we're getting off. You can go to mass.gov/DCR/past-public-meetings. That's where you're going to find the recording from tonight's presentation as well as the slide deck. And then if you have additional comments as this project presentation ends and you're thinking about it over the course of the next 2 weeks, you can provide us comments at mass.gov/DCR/public-comments. That deadline is going to be Wednesday, May 19th. If there is any additional DCR general information questions or project-related questions, you can email mass.parks@mass.gov. So thanks everyone again for spending your time with us this evening, and we're looking forward to seeing the public comments come in during the next 2 weeks. So thanks everyone, and I hope you have a great night. Thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.